It's now 6 o'clock, so we need to start the meeting. First of all, I don't think there's going to be a fire drill tonight of all nights, but if you need to get out quickly, then just go down the stairs to the entrance that you came in at to get out. I think they've got someone there, so it won't be locked as it is for members sometimes at late meetings. So start the agenda then, and welcome to members of the public who've come, especially the speakers, I suppose, but there's quite a few other people who've come to the meeting as well. So welcome to all of you. Apologies for absence, that's the first item on the agenda.
Thank you,
Lucy,
Chair.
Oh, I should have introduced the members of staff actually who are here, because almost outnumber the numbers on the committee. Starting from my far left, there's Mike Hayes, who's the Planning Policy Manager, Sean Robson, who's Interim Development Manager, Steve Capes, Director of Place and Economy, Lucy Harrison, who's Democratic Services Officer. She'll be keeping us straight and doing minutes and such like. And Barbara Beardwell's Interim Director of Corporate and Customer Services. On my right, Councillor O'Brien is my Vice Chairman. Paul Wilson, Chief Executive. Rob Coggins, Director of Housing. Jeremy Mason, Housing Enabling and Development Manager. And then all the councillors on the committee. So thank you for that. Right, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies of absence from Councillor Bull, and Councillor Bates is here as substitute.
Thank you. Right, item 2, approval of minutes of the previous meetings. There are 3 of those actually, strangely enough. So there's 22nd of July, 30th of July and 12th of September. So would someone like to propose that we approve those minutes? Councillor O'Brien?
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Yeah. Seconded. Councillor Wayne, thank you. Then to receive the minutes of the subcommittee meeting, that was Local Plan Subcommittee on the 16th of July. Oh, sorry, we should have a vote on that, shouldn't we? Vote on approving the minutes. So. All in favour? Right. Any abstentions? No. 1 abstention. Any against? No? Right, that's okay then. So to receive the minutes of the subcommittee meeting on this, of the Local Plan Subcommittee on the 16th of July. Would someone like to propose that we receive those minutes? Yes, Councillor Dobbs. Seconder. Councillor O'Brien. Everybody happy with that? Who's in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Right. Okay, thank you. Right, so then we move on to page 2 actually. Public participation. We have 5 speakers tonight. No.
Excuse me, Chair.
Councillor Roger Shelley, who's here, I think, as a... Oh, yes. Yes, Councillor.
With the public participation, Chair,
Yes.
I was thinking, how about us moving, when it's suitable, item 11 to the front of the agenda, to save these good folks sitting here all night, considering there's potentially some more snow on its way.
Right, yes. How do members feel about that? Would someone like to propose that we do that, or... Yeah. There are several proposing it. How do other members feel about that? Yeah, so we take that as item, I think 7, isn't it? Yeah, the other issue is that I've been reminded about, and of course it's obvious from the agenda, the item on the our comments on the Peak National Park local plan are quite urgent as well, because they have to be received by the National Park Authority by the 29th, so they have to be dealt with at this meeting. So and I suppose that, as Barbara Beardwell here has just advised, if we dealt with the Gritstone Road planning appeal rather, at the same time, and that one would relieve officers who are here for that particular subject. And then, so if we do those two, I suggest we do those 2 first, then we go on to the Egyptian traveller identification. So it's items 9 and 10, and then 11. Then we'll go back to 7. Is that clear? Right. Everybody happy with that? Yes, right. Thank you. Right. So I'll go back to public participation. We've got speakers tonight. I'll just find them again. I've lost the speakers now. That's it. Yes, was Councillor Roger Shelley to start with, as Dollydale Ward member, to make a statement. Thank you, Roger.
Good evening, councillors. It's always a pleasure to be speaking to you from this side of the table for a change. So I'll be brief. What's this about? It's item 10 on your agenda, which, as you've indicated, is the Peak Parks consultation, which is an opportunity to engage constructively in the Peak Parks local plan, incidentally at the same time that we're going through our own process, which is an unusual opportunity. So I was surprised to see under issue 42, when you get that far, in their consultation paper, that there is an option being considered by the Peak Park for which appears to be closing down the possibility for the future reinstatement of rail on the route between Matlock and Buxton. Now, I'm not necessarily in favour one way or the other on this, but I just thought it was interesting that they were proposing that at this point in time. I think I'm one of a number of people who actually think it's important to keep our options open in this for the future. And that does include the principle of retaining that route as a strategic transport link in the future. So, as opposed to the form of wording that you've got in front of you when you look at issue 42, I've got a suggested alternative form of wording, which I'd like you to consider at the appropriate time, and that is that the District Council should support the Peak Park Authority's option 1, namely that the new policy will continue to safeguard the Monsall and Longdendale trails for future rail use. A suggested change from this to protect them exclusively as multi-user routes would imply precluding ever considering their use for rail reinstatement. The District Council supports the principle of further expansion of an active travel hub across the Peak. So the reason I'm putting that forward, as I say, is really just to ensure that we don't inadvertently shut down this debate in the future, any possibility of considering that strategic transport link. I know 3.5 years ago the Council noted the concerns of the Peak District National Park and the County Council about proposals for that possible rail reinstatement. I mean, those are good reasons there, but equally I think it's important now, 3.5 years further on, that we do not shut down that option and consider the importance of our climate change goals, which, as we get further and further into this climate emergency, mean that it's incumbent on us all, I think, to consider how we are going to address that issue of travel and pollution through the Peak Park. That's all I really want to say. It's over to you to consider how you want to debate that when you get to item 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shelley. Roger, should I say? Thank you. Right, so going on to the further questions then, or further statements on the permanent gypsum traveller site identification. Mr. Victor Lorne, Matlock Bath resident, to make a statement. You have 3 minutes, starting when you're prepared, with your microphone on.
Thank you, Chair. At the last committee meeting dealing with this, we were presented with a site matrix for the temporary sites, which included errors so basic that it called into question the competency of the current exercise for permanent sites. In the case of Matlock Bath, there were 2 major errors and 1 complete omission. When faced with these errors, the response of one councillor after the public had left was to say, "We are where we are," indicating that it was too late to go back. I find this, frankly, disgusting. The omission derived from a completely inappropriate specification and a complete lack of awareness of the topography of Matlock Bath. A cut-off line of 100 metres from residential properties was applied to give a marking for suitability, but this in no way recognised the unique riverine valley location of the village, unlike all of the other temporary sites, which are effectively and by comparison in open level ground. Sound carries much further here than in any of the other locations, and indeed is amplified. following principles known even to the ancient Greeks. During the lockdowns, Matlock Bath residents put on concerts from their front gardens. The music could be heard throughout the valley. We all know this. The council, its officers and agents do not, and they did not ask. If you wish to build a stage in the amphitheatre of the valley, you could not pick a better location than the car park. Noise generated there is in fact louder a full 350 metres away in residential streets on the other side of the valley than it is on the adjacent A6, thanks to the bouncing sound waves. This isn't my opinion. I bought a decibel meter. I could confirm it. Never mind, according to you councillors, the noise which began every day at 6 a.m. and would carry on past midnight and included shouting, profanities, generators and other heavy equipment was only temporary. 2 years of temporary, which excludes the previous 2 years of unauthorised encampments. Councillors, this is what temporary sounds like. I'm sure you won't like it. If it works. It won't work. I apologise. Anyway, we'll ignore that. It is shouting, it is swearing, it is effing, it is seeing. It is constant. It is from 6 in the morning until gone midnight with generators. For 2 temporary years, we've been woken up by this sort of noise. For 2 temporary years, our children have tried to study for exams to it. For 2 temporary years, we've worked to this. For 2 temporary years, we've tried to relax in our gardens to this. For 2 temporary years, we've had to keep our windows shut to this. I'm sorry you can't hear it. Welcome. Come to my bedroom, you'll hear it. I have 3 minutes to speak. Then you can kill my microphone. If I continue to speak, you can have me escorted off the premises. The temporary noise that you ask us to endure, we have endured for over 1 million temporary minutes in the last 2 years, plus the years before. In return, we get 3 before you turn off the microphone. I wonder if my microphone and my speaker had worked, whether you would have accepted carrying on this meeting with it playing in the background, as we've had to do for our lives for the last 2 years plus. I think the residents here would say that would be fair. But we don't get that choice. We go back home and we listen to it again. Councillors, you've imposed enough on Matlock Bath. We have done what you asked for 2 years. Before that, unrecognised for another 2 to 3 years. Whatever the outcome of the search for a permanent site, Matlock Bath should not remain on the temporary site list for a second longer. You have stolen millions of minutes of our peace over the last 2 years. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Victor. Now, Kim Lornett. Mrs. Kim Lornett. Oh, Kim, yeah.
You'll be pleased to hear I don't have any technology to attempt to use this evening.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Sure. Having been presented with that severely flawed selection matrix for temporary sites last meeting, we felt it essential to ask what ARC had been tasked to do for the permanent site phase, i.e. what parameters or criteria for consideration or dismissal of site were in play. We contacted a senior officer of the council asking what terms of reference were supplied to ARC. The council promises on its website to answer all such correspondence within 10 working days, or 5 to acknowledge receipt if an answer will take longer. After 11 working days, we'd received neither a reply nor an acknowledgement, so we submitted a Freedom of Information request, as is our right. And our request was as follows: to supply the contract, requirements, terms of reference, project brief issued by the council to ARC Consultancy, which will form the basis of their final report. If this is not contained within the documents listed above, please also supply details of any instructions given to ARC or parameters assumed by them to determine whether and how a site was to be included or excluded. That second sentence is really important. The answer we received, in effect, merely said that ARC was going to carry out research in liaison with council officers and departments. It gave us nothing else and completely ignored our request to be provided with details of parameters provided to or adopted by ARC to determine whether or how a site was going to be included or excluded in their report. We appealed the response that we got and were told that we'd been given all the information that the council was required to give us, which was also all that ARC had been given. In rejecting our appeal, the officer argued the specification for traveller sites had already been agreed at council in September 2023 and so was already in the public domain and ARC already had it. Whilst this was discussed at project inception, I didn't feel the need to provide it to ARC again, as they already had it. They did not apparently think it would be helpful to actually point this out to us or point out where the documents were, either in the original reply or in our Freedom of Information request. As a former council officer myself, I find this very poor and a really unacceptable way to treat a question from a member of the public. Not that it matters. We've reviewed the documents from the meeting of the full council. The information we requested is not there. There are no parameters. Much of it talks about groups of councillors meeting up and having a chat about places, then rejecting or accepting them without giving any insight as to how they came to those conclusions. Nevertheless, the information we've requested does exist, it seems, because today, in the briefing pack for agenda item 11, which you've all got in front of you, you will see that, quote, ARC developed a site assessment matrix taking into consideration site area requirements, etc. Well, this is what we were asking for. This is the document that we asked for. It's information which is accessible to council officers. It falls under the council's FOI remit, having been created under a contract that you set out. It would have required no additional research to provide it, and yet when we asked for it in an FOI request, we weren't given it. We weren't even asking for outcomes. We were just asking for the matrix to understand what the criteria were they were assessing sites with. We still have no idea, absolutely no idea, how ARC has come to any conclusions. And I'm prepared to bet that half the councillors here today have no idea what the parameters were for inclusion or exclusion either. I regard the response to our questions as incomplete and demonstrating bad faith. Councillors, the taxpayers of the Derbyshire Dales, have already lost confidence in this whole process. How can our experience possibly make that any better? Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next speaker is Victoria Friend, a Roadley resident, to make a statement and ask a question as well.
When Paul Wilson, the current Chief Executive of this council, came to speak to the people of Roseley in 2012 about designating a temporary traveller site on Old Station Close, he told us in explicit terms that the car park was not suitable for a permanent site and would not be considered as one. Imagine our surprise when the agenda for this meeting came out last week with a report that stated Roseley had been on a short list of 6 places being considered for a permanent traveller site. In 2012, it was officers of the council who came to Roseley, not elected councillors. It was clear that this was to show the actions were not politically motivated, but taken purely to comply with the law. So, if Roseley was not considered by a current serving officer of this council as suitable for a permanent site in 2012, what has changed since then? The answer is nothing. The site is the same, the access is the same, the amenities are the same. So why was Roseley ever on the list? The report states that the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group have recommended that at the present time the council does not take any further action in relation to Roseley Car Park due to site constraints. The people of Roseley have a right to know exactly what these site constraints are and why they only apply to a permanent site and not a temporary one. The people of Roseley also have the right to know what the disturbing phrase "at the present time" means. Is it that these site constraints will miraculously disappear if no suitable and affordable private land can be found, and suddenly our car park, an absolutely essential resource, will be turned into a permanent site for a family who hate it there? Roseley Parish Council want to see the plans of what you intend to provide on your permanent traveller sites, as well as the associated provisional costings. We also want to see the so-called detailed assessment the ARC have put together on the Woodyard at Homesford that brings such a massive price tag. The community deserve full transparency regarding the analysis of the Woodyard. We would like to see the 5-pitch plan designed by Pelham Architects, as well as the original 8-pitch plan that had planning permission. 2 weeks ago, the children living in social housing on Chatsworth Road in Roseley had their 2 lone pieces of play equipment ripped out of the ground without any warning, and we are told that there is no money to replace them. No money to replace a slide and a seesaw that children have been playing on for 50 years. And you're talking about erecting individual utility blocks on every pitch for one family that, by their own admission, do not want to live in bricks and mortar. Does anyone else see the irony here? A utility block provides the owners of a caravan with everything except a bedroom. So in reality, they would be living in bricks and mortar, just not sleeping there. When budgets are this constrained, surely there is space for a compromise between the government's good practice guide and nothing, which is what we have had for 20 years. Finally, we would like to know who has seen the latest ARC report, because Susan Hobson, a member of the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group, definitely had not when the agenda for this meeting was published, which raises a number of very concerning questions.
Thank you.
So I've been told I can read out the questions that I have sent in for the meeting. Number 1, who decided that Old Station Close Roseley should be considered by ARC Consultancy as a permanent traveller site when residents of Roseley had been assured in the past by Paul Wilson that it was not suitable and would not be considered at any time?
Right, yeah, I thought you were going to ask you 3 questions first. I'll answer that one in that case.
Yeah.
ARC asked for and were provided with a list of the previous stopping places used by travellers in the past. As with other sites, the Roseley site has been occupied previously and had the benefit of a temporary planning permission for use by travellers. ARC were provided with these details. You want to ask your next question?
Yeah. What are the site constraints mentioned at Roseley Old Station Close in 2.8 of the report attached to the agenda that led to the working group recommending that no further action be taken at the present time?
Yeah, the answer to that one is that ARC noted in their report the fact that the site is impacted by flood risk concerns, current use as a car park, and safeguarding of the railway line in the adopted Derbyshire Dales local plan. Let's ask you a 3rd question.
Yeah. Why do these site constraints not also prevent Roseley Old Station Close from being considered as a temporary traveller site?
It is a matter for Council to determine at the appropriate time whether the site is appropriate for use as a temporary site, having regard to the site constraints that exist. Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. The next speaker is Mr. John Hewitt to make a statement. Hello, John. You know the procedure. You've got 3 minutes, starting when you've switched your microphone on. Yeah.
Councillors.
Is your mic? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yes. Councillors, the secrecy and refusal to talk in person has placed the owners and me, the owners of the Woodyard and me, in an impossible situation. No replies to a host of emails. The Nottingham Axis has proposed a plan for 5 pitches that has not been published. The ARC report has not been released. However, I'm anxious to move forward. The owners have sent to you their statement on services. It will be far less than the 1.3 million quoted in the report they haven't seen. The owners and I are convinced that the Woodyard must be used for at least 6 pitches and other uses. We suggest that when you engage positively, we hope you will, there are 2 design and planning services in Matlock, MHA and Planning Design, who could be tasked by the Council to prepare a new planning application. In the meantime, I suggest that you buy the site now to secure it. It's always at risk. Meanwhile, the site could be prepared urgently for at least 6 families, as temporarily tolerated initially and with a view to permanency by ARC.
then ARC could carry on looking for additional sites. I believe there are many on the list. Additional sites to meet the remaining need. So, in summary, do not deselect the Woodyard. Develop it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Right, the last speaker, in fact, is Mr. Kevin Rowney, or Roney, local resident, to make a statement and ask a question. Hello, Kevin. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not making a statement. I'm just asking 3 questions. The first one has sort of been touched on already. Can Roseley Parish Council have a copy of the Council's requirements and specifications for permanent pitches as mentioned in the report for this meeting in Agenda 11, Section 2.3, along with Pelham Architects 5 pitch feasibility drawing mentioned in Section 2.4 and the 8 pitch design for which the Woodyard at Homesford was granted planning permission approval also mentioned in Section 2.4.
The answer to that is, that's your first question. Roseley Parish Council will be provided with a copy of the Council's requirements and specifications for permanent pitches. The drawing provided by Pelham Architects is commercially sensitive information and therefore is not disclosable. The 8 pitch design is available via the planning portal as it accompanied the planning application made by the owner's agent at the time. That's your second question.
Thank you. On the 6th of August, I submitted details to the Travellers address of a private individual excuse me, in possession of land who was willing to discuss both the rent and sale to the council for the Travellers site. And on 8th of August, I had an unsigned email reply that the details would be passed to ARC. Has this been done, and has ARC considered this land for both a temporary and permanent site?
Yes, the contact was followed up, but nothing has yet come of the contact. Yeah. Did you hear that? The contact was followed up, but nothing has yet come of the contact.
Okay. Third question. On the 27th of October, Tommy Shaw confirmed in writing that the notes of the public meetings held during the consultation on temporary traveller sites would be circulated to all councillors before any decisions are made on the outcome of the consultation. As Tommy Shaw no longer works for the council, is this still the case?
The answer to that is yes. The notes of the public meetings will be published as part of a future report to consider this issue.
Thank you.
It's the remaining question from Sian Bacon, from Roseley Parish Council, regarding item 11, permanent gypsy and traveller site identification. She isn't here tonight, so I'll read her question and give you the answer. Roseley Parish Council understands the confidentiality GDPR requirements relating to the 3 sites under consideration for a permanent traveller site, as mentioned in the report submitted for the agenda item tonight. But there currently appears to be very limited transparency behind many decisions that have been made on this subject, whether in relation to temporary or permanent sites. I think a great number of residents and businesses would support a possibly redacted version of the ARC consultancy report being placed in the public domain. Please confirm whether the council are willing to provide this. The response is that the ARC report contains both personal and commercially sensitive information which is not disclosable at the present time. Disclosure would be likely to prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs, even in a redacted form. I think that's all the speakers for tonight. So we need to move on to the next item on the agenda. And that's, first of all, interests. Item 5, interests. Have any members got any interest they want to declare? Yes, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Peak District National Park Authority and sit on the local plan review group for the national park, and so won't be commenting on question 10.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nash. Same, that's right. Yeah, right. Thank you. Right,
Chair.
Item 6 then. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Councillor Murphy.
I sit on the Peak Park as well.
Right. Very good. Okay, thank you. That's it for interest. Okay, thank you. Right, item 6 then, questions pursuant to Rule of Procedure number 15, and that's questions from members. So go back to another sheet now, try and find it. Not that one. No, okay. Right, first of all, question for Councillor Sue Hobson to me, in fact, as Chair of the Community Environment Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Can the Chair tell me the names of the officers and councillors who have seen the full report by Arc Consultancy and aware of the locations of the 3 potential permanent gypsy and traveller sites that are being voted on this evening?
The response is the ARC report has been seen by the PA leadership, Councillor Flitter, Councillor Butler and Councillor Butcher. In addition, the report has been seen by Councillor Melstrom and Councillor Franks as part of a leaders' meeting where Councillor Melstrom attended as Deputy Leader, substituting Councillor Butler, and Councillor Franks attended as Chair of the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group. Officers who have seen the report are the Chief Executive, the Director of Housing and the Interim Director of Corporate and Customer Services, a monitoring officer. Okay.
Could you, for people who aren't sure who those people are, could they be, you know, the names be, not perhaps now, but sent in an email with the exact names of those people, please?
Yes, I'm sure it can, yes.
Thank you,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
My follow-up question is, I'm a member of the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group. You know, I haven't seen that full report, so it appears that not everybody on the Gypsy and Traveller Working Group has seen that report. Why haven't all members seen it? And why, as you chair of this committee, have you not seen it? We've already had people talking about the lack of transparency and openness in our decision making. I think it's absolutely appalling. Thank you.
All to say to that is that myself and Councillor O'Brien haven't seen it either.
Terrible. Thank you.
Question from Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, Chair. Do you find the sum of allocating and spending £25,000 on 3 sites in completely unknown areas as stated has been an acceptable way to make decisions with very little information provided on how and what it is to be spent on?
The response is the costs reflect the fees associated with looking at 3 sites in more detail. Paragraph 3.5 sets out the costs at up to £4,000 per site, so £12,000 in total, not £25,000. Paragraph 8.4 details how the £12,000 will be spent. As paragraph 3.5 states, the balance of £13,000 will be used to procure development agency support, as the Council does not have the in-house skills or capacity to undertake this work.
Supplementary, Chair. Should this work not have been carried out as part of Phase 2 within the costings?
I suppose it could be. I mean, I'm not privy to the details of that, so I can't really answer it unless Rob, you can answer this.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. The budget for the Phase 2 work was set around the specification. It's already been referred to this evening. More detailed investigations require additional cost, so that's the additional budget. So it couldn't be included in the Phase 2 report.
Thank you, Chair. We just seem to be chucking endless money at a bottomless pit, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, third question is from Councillor Dermot Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I've been contacted by several residents who, like me, have been keen to see Derbyshire Dales District Council find a permanent solution to the settlement of the travellers. The Woodyard site at Homesford on the A6 was thought to be a very realistic option by many. The only site in the district that has planning consent. Agenda item 11, section 2.3 of the report states that the cost of developing the Woodyard site would amount to 1.3 million. Can officers please share a detailed breakdown of these costs? In recent years, the good standing of Derbyshire Dales District Council has been damaged by the lack of transparency concerning traveller sites. Let's share the detailed analysis that created this figure of 1.3 million.
Thank you, Councillor. The response is ARC have used an established industry standard appraisal tool, ProVal, to establish the likely scheme costs prepared by a quantity surveyor and how the scheme performs against industry recognised performance parameters. The costs include the cost of land acquisition, based upon what we consider to be the landowner's expectations, the QS estimated cost of works, which include incoming services, and that's a huge figure, I understand, drainage, landscaping, site clearance, adoptable works, preliminaries and fees. Do you have a follow-up question?
Right. What would be useful for the public would be that we have the actual figures, because people are questioning me as to how unrealistic they think this £1.3 million is. Obviously, if we don't see the workings, it's very hard for us to make a judgment. What can we do to improve the transparency for the local residents?
Yeah, thank you for that. I've also asked that question, so I'll ask Rob to respond.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the response outlines, there is quite a complicated spreadsheet that a QS has completed that quantifies all of the elements of the proposed development, costing that up, which includes a retaining wall, surface water runoff, drainage, water connection, sewage connection, utility buildings. It's quite an extensive list that comes together to make with the acquisition cost, or the cost that's required by the owners that we're aware of, to 1.3 million. And in today's world of inflation, it will only go up, not down. So the figures that we've have seen reflect that from a qualified QS that have been costed appropriately.
Right, I think that concludes the questions from members. So we now go on to what we've decided to do, as we've agreed earlier, is to go on to the last three items. I think that's correct. So we start with the planning appeal at Gritstone Road, Matlock, item 9. Then we'll go on to 10, and then 11. So planning appeal, Gritstone Road. Sean, would you like to start the discussion on that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you. Just to draw my attention to item number 9. This is just outlining two options, two recommendations within the report, in the detail of the report. The first one is setting out the Council's stance in terms of the defence of the actual public inquiry and the predicted amounts that are going to be costed against that, or required to cost against that. And the second recommendation, if members are managed to agree, is to extend a supplementary budget for the planning team leader within the development management team to take up on some of the daily responsibilities, as I will be swept into the public inquiry dealing with that as well. So effectively, the costings that are in there, or the stance of defending the appeal robustly, are covered in those costs, and the amount contained there is what we anticipate it's likely to cost. It's unlikely that it will be in excess of that, but I cannot categorically say it won't go above that mark. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from members on this particular item? Yeah, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, it's not a question. I should have said about a conflict of interest on this item as well, as one of the reasons for refusal relates to biodiversity, and my employer is the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, who provide the biodiversity advice to the District Council, and so I won't be commenting on this report either.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, it's a couple of questions really. I'd just like to know that, as you're aware and other people are aware, there has been somewhat of a fiasco in the accepting of this appeal. It was lodged potentially late, and also associated documentation was not, supporting documentation was, by all intents and purposes, not supplied to the council in a time-bound manner. How's this going to affect the council's effectiveness in a robust defence? And a little sub-question to that is, have we secured counsel yet? Thank you.
Can you answer that, Sean?
Yes, I can, Chair, through you. To take the last question first, we have secured a KC on this particular application, a gentleman from number 5 Chambers, Richard Kimblin, the council actually has used in the past for other matters. We are in discussions with him, and we also have a group together to cover the 6 points in which the appellant have set out what their case is going to revolve around. In terms of the timings, the individuals I've been speaking to and coordinating with, that hasn't phased them. They are into this already, Councillor, and that is in advance of the authority's statement of cases, which will be exchanged with PINs as of the 4th of next month, 4th of December. That's the first trigger date within the timetable set. So to answer your question, despite the journey this appeal has got to this point, journey is probably the best word to use, we are in a robust position to defend this.
Thank you. And the second question basically is, there's a wealth of knowledge, there's a significant amount of knowledge that have been gleaned during the actual application process, which has been going on for 5 years. A lot of this mainly to do with the surface water and foul water issues has been put on the portal, but there is new information. How are you going to ensure that that information is put into the defence? I'm not talking about stuff that's come in after the 28th, you know, and the decision was made. I'm talking about other, you know, the other information that was present about the surface water flows and the fact that the significant amount of water that come down the hill. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair, if I could. I mean, without tripping into the point that the Chairman made, in terms of discussing the validity or the case which we're putting forward, I don't think it's appropriate. This is the appropriate venue to answer that question, Councillor. I can answer that separately to you outside of this forum, but I don't think it's worth putting this into the public domain just yet, because obviously that will represent the council's
I think
case.
the gist of my question was that whether it was going to be considered, but I understand that. Thank you.
Questions? No? So we need to move to debate, but before that I'll just say that, just to remind you, well, Sean has done that already, but this meeting is not the right place to discuss the details of the appeal defence. This is a public meeting, and the appellant and or their advisers may well view it on YouTube. It's important not to say or do anything that might later damage this council's case. Okay. Would someone like to propose the recommendation? Yes, Councillor Dobbs. Would you like to speak?
Only briefly, Chair.
Yes.
Just to say that in respect for part 2 of this, having seen what happened last time, it is all-encompassing, and Sean was just totally drawn into this tunnel of the appeal, and yes, he does need some support to do somebody to do the day job, as it were, whilst he's involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, a seconder, Councillor Wayne.
Sorry, nothing to say. Just let's get on with it. Thanks. Cheers.
Any further contributions? Yes, Councillor Hobson.
It's just a comment, Chair. You know, we approved that £250,000 at the last meeting, and then we're approving more money now. There could be other costs. I do have grave fears for this budget of this council. That's my comment. Thank you.
Any comment on that, Sean, at all?
Just to say that obviously we can't future gauge what it may or may not be, or how this appeal could turn out. I mean, an amount was agreed. It may not cost up to that amount, but conversely, I think I touched upon before that it may slip over that, but I can't say that at this stage.
Any further contributions to debate? No? So it's been proposed and seconded that we support these recommendations. First of all, that the approach to defending the appeal set out in section 3 of the report is agreed, and secondly, that Council be requested to approve a supplementary revenue budget of £61,778 to provide for the extension of the contracts of the interim principal planning officer to the 31st of March 2025. So it's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour of that? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Okay, that's item 9. We're going to item 10 now then. This is the Peak National Park local plan review issues and options consultation and this council's response to it. So I'll ask Mike Hayes to outline this report.
Thank you, Chair.
Mike.
Members, the report you have before you this evening sets out in a fairly standard format for these types of report the issues and options that arise from the National Parks consultation review and the potential response to the 54 questions that the National Park Authority have set in their consultation with a view to trying to get the response back to the National Park Authority by their deadline of the 29th of this month. In considering the report, members, I think there are 4 key questions that have been foremost in the responses that I've drafted out in the report. Firstly, does the plan deliver sustainable community, or is it likely to deliver sustainable development for communities in the National Park? Will it deliver proportionate economic growth and housing, and will it deliver the relevant services and facilities that are required to continue the sustainability of the National Park? Those are 4 key questions that have been in the forefront of the response or the preparation of the report. And the reason that those are at the forefront of the sort of my mind in preparing this report is in relation to the response that the council has made over many, many years to the National Park in relation to their local plan, their core strategy, and also in relation to previous plans and documents that have been prepared that cover the National Park. I don't really want to necessarily go through every one of those in detail because there's quite a lot of issues to cover. I'm quite happy to deal with questions as and when they arise. Just in relation to the point that Councillor Shelley made on issue 42, he's quite right that in 2021 the Council considered a formal report in relation to the consideration about the potential reversion of the route from Matlock to Buxton to a railway line. At that particular point in time, the Council made a determined decision to effectively take a neutral stance, supporting what the National Parks view and the County Council's views were at that particular time. That doesn't mean to say that in response to this particular consultation, this committee could take a slightly different view in relation to the response. But what that doesn't do is necessarily formally change the Council's position on the approach that it's taken and the approach it's taken previously. Members, you'll also note that in the questions, the last few questions, they are comments there to the effect that it's down to members to submit responses if they wish to do so. And the reason for doing that is that those relate to minerals and waste issues, and those sit beyond the remit of this authority. So I've left that effectively down to members if they wish to make any responses to that. If they would like to do that, can I urge them to do that within the next couple of days so we can get the response over to the National Park within their deadline. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from members? No? Okay. So we move on to debate in that case then. Would someone like to propose the recommendation? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to propose the recommendation. I do think there's a lot of detail in this report, and it may well be that members, including myself, would perhaps nuance to some extent some of the responses. So in moving the report, I hope that colleagues would find it in order that unless the committee violently disagrees with anything that anyone's put forward, that the final response can be agreed with officers and the chair, if that's appropriate. So in moving the report, I do very much welcome it. Not just the points that are made in the detail of the response, but the firm tone in which they're expressed. And I think, as Mike says, this very much reflects the views expressed by this council over many years, and to an extent the frustration that the National Park Authority doesn't always appear to take a great deal of notice of our response, which is strange given that, as we know, 33,000 of our residents or thereabout, that's almost half the population of the district, live in the national park. So as a council, we have a responsibility to those 33,000 residents. This council responsibility with due diligence. And I think that those of us who represent communities in the national park are only too well aware of the impact of many of the national park's planning policies. And what we know, and what I think now the National Park Authority have acknowledged, is that during the lifetime of the current plan, the lifeblood has been sucked out of many of our communities because younger working families simply can't find homes they can afford to buy or somewhere to rent. So you have no choice but to vote with their feet. And essentially, we're sleepwalking into a future where our villages will become museum pieces, beautifully preserved, but that's about all. Our communities in the national park, they're living organisms, and as such they need nurturing and they need nourishment. And housing is a key feature of that nourishment. So the question we've got to ask ourselves when we look at the proposals put forward by the National Park is whether they're realistically addressing these issues, or do they, as Mike Hayes' report, in many extents fall short. They're warm words and a lot of hand-wringing, but are they actually addressing the real issues that the National Park, the communities in the National Park face? As Mike says, there's a wealth of detail here, and I'm not going to go through each of those proposed responses in detail, but 5 or 6 points I would like to stress, Chair. When they talk about a spatial strategy, this sort of planning jargon, we're never quite sure what that means, but to me, what I want to see in a spatial strategy is the National Park Authority being proactive in bringing forward affordable housing. I want to see it right at the top of the list as a strategic objective, along with what they call their statutory purposes in protecting the landscape, etc. I want to see it right up front, so it hits you in the eye that the National Park Authority is there to deliver affordable housing. A question I put to colleagues, many of you will realise that market housing, housing to buy, is virtually banned in the National Park. Now, I think we should ask ourselves why that is. Why is it totally out of order for new houses to be built in Grindleford, to be built in Eam, to be built in Hathersage and Stony Middleton, for local people to buy. What damage is a sensitively designed, well-constructed new building that a local family in my village can buy? What damage is that going to do to the National Park? We have to ask ourselves why the National Park Authority believes that any development is going to destroy the character of the National Park. There's a lot of talk in here about a settlement hierarchy. What I would say, that is a good start, but let's not overcomplicate things. Looking at 4 tiers of settlement. Let's just keep it simple. Most villages in the National Park would welcome some new affordable homes. The 4 villages in my ward, they all have different levels of services. They're all very different. So it's quite likely that they would end up in different settlement strategies, but they all have one thing in common. They all want more affordable homes. So I don't want any hierarchy to get in the way of delivering new homes to Eam, Stony, Hathersage and Grindleford. The biggest handicap that we have in the National Park in its planning policy is that no housing sites are identified. And I think, as we know in our corporate priorities, if you don't identify any sites for housing, you place an incredible burden on developers, whether they're private developers or social housing providers. If they don't know where the sites are, it's really difficult for them to take an interest and bring forward development. And for whatever reason, the National Park Authority have consistently refused to designate any housing sites. They have now made a suggestion that they might consider doing that in Bakewell. Fine. Let's consider doing it wherever any community would welcome new development. Let the National Park Authority give them that helping hand in identifying sites. Let's get them to work with communities to identify sites and bring them forward. There's talk about the local connection and what's called the 10-year rule. You have to have currently you have to have a minimum of 10 years association with your local community to be eligible to move into affordable housing, rented affordable housing. Now, I have to say that that is an antiquated rule now. If you can't show commitment within 5 years to your community, then I don't think you're ever going to. So let's introduce some more flexibility. 5 years is quite sufficient for a family to show their commitment to the local community. You don't need to have to live in expensive rented accommodation for 10 years in order to demonstrate your commitment to that community. So let's be more realistic. I do have a bit of a concern about the tone expressed in paragraph 31 about the local connection to communities. When we build affordable housing in our villages, we do so on the basis of a housing needs survey, where the local communities we quantify the amount of new housing, affordable housing. And the very first question that is always put to those of us who represent our local communities is that housing going to be available to us? Are we going to get first choice on this affordable housing? And at the moment we're able to say yes, because there's a very clear priority. It says if you live in a village, or if you're associated with a village or the next adjoining village, you have first top priority when it comes to the allocation of affordable housing. Now, we know that that's unpopular with housing providers. They don't like that restriction for a variety of reasons. But that is of paramount importance to our local communities, and I think it's in paramount importance to this council that priority is retained. So I would not like to see any indication to the National Park Authority that this council wants to water down that commitment. Moving away from housing, looking at car parking. Now, I think when you move around this building, you see lots of wonderful images of the national park, lots of lovely pictures. They look absolutely beautiful. And you go to some of these places at the weekend, in weekdays, in the summer, and that is not how you see them. You see them full of lumps of metal, cars everywhere. The number of visitors coming into the national park by car has increased exponentially over the last 25 years. And over that 25 years, you've heard the National Park Authority say year after year, we must do something about it. And absolutely nothing has emerged from Oldham House as to what they propose to do. And I have to say, looking at the options that they put forward in this report, nothing is going to change. I think they completely missed the point. They complain, as I said, that a new house is going to despoil the national park. It's completely contrary to the objectives of the national park. They don't seem to have a problem, as I said, with thousands of lumps of metal disfiguring the park at weekends. I think they need to completely reappraise their approach to car parking. And let's look at examples of other national parks like the Lake District National Park, where effectively the Lake District says you cannot park anywhere in the national park unless you're a resident, except in the designated spaces. So you look at car parking from the other end of the telescope. Rather than telling people where you can't park, you say you can't park anywhere, you can only park in the designated spaces. And that's the sort of, that's not radical thinking to me, that is common sense thinking, which says we have a national asset here, we value our countryside, but it's being despoiled by the cars. So I'd like us to be firmer on car parking and acknowledge that we have a real issue here, which unless we address it now, it's too late. Finally, I do support the proposal put forward by Councillor Shelley in respect to issue 42. I think it misguided, totally misguided for the National Park Authority to remove the possibility that that previous rail line can be used at any time in the future for some form of transit system. Not necessarily the railway we see it today. Like Councillor Shelley, I'm sceptical of the current proposal, but I don't want. I want to see. I don't want to foreclose the opportunity for, in future, for enterprise or the government to come forward with a proposal for a transit system through the national park, which works to the benefit of Matlock, Derby, the cities of the East Midlands, and to Manchester on the other side, but also works to the benefits of our local communities. I think we'd be foolish to foreclose that opportunity. So I would ask that we revise our opinion on issue 42. Thank you, Chair. You can see that I feel passionately about this. It's really, really important to our communities. So I hope you'll share that passion with me. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Bryan, for that emotive presentation and proposal that, or moving of the resolution on this item. Perhaps I should have declared interest really, because I built a lot of those car parks in the national park. Anyway, is someone prepared to second the proposal? Is that what you're prepared to do, Councillor Chapman?
I'll second it, and I would like to.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I'll second it, and I'd just like to make a few points. It's not strictly true, Peter, that the Peak Park don't encourage housing developments. I mean, we've got the Bakewell development, we've got the Hartington development, we've got the Tysewell development, which I want to sort of expand on a bit, and perhaps offer a hybrid version of a planning system. The
the local needs development in Tizewell is for 30 houses, and it's been approved through the national park. It's been held up by the fact that pollution problems in Tizewell Brook are amongst the worst in the country, pharmaceuticals, etc., etc. And the development in Tizewell is being held up by Natural England, not by the Peak District National Park Authority. So my sort of suggestion there would be that perhaps in a situation like that, the 30 houses, maybe it would be sensible to allow maybe 2 or 3 market houses, open market houses, that would then pay probably for the developer to install a treatment works, which would solve the problem, which would stop any more pollution in Tizewell Brook, and it would allow the 27 others to be developed for local needs. But that's what's the problem is at the moment. It's not the national park. Just going on to the traffic thing and the designated bays. You've probably not seen Mamtor and Castleton at weekends, Peter. I'm sure you have, but you've not taken notice of them because people ignore totally designated bays and approved car parking spaces. The national park and the Hope Valley, with which I'm intimately involved with, people just don't take any notice of any regulations on parking. It's the way of the world. It's the way it's gone. It's been exacerbated since COVID, but cars park anywhere, and there's the only people who can enforce that are the highways. Is Derbyshire County Council. They're the ones who need to get a grip on the parking. They're the ones who need whatever you do, manpower. I mean, regularly at the approach to Mamtor going into Edale, there are between 90 and 100 cars ticketed every weekend, and the same on the Ladybower viaduct going out of Bamford. It's hundreds, 120, 130 cars are ticketed each day at weekend. So that's not something a national park can control. It's got to be a county council, highways, police are involved. So that's where the onus needs to be put. I'll finish off with the Matlock to Buxton line, and I think what you're looking at is not a full understanding of the situation. The Matlock to Buxton line runs from Matlock, then it goes to Darleydale. Now, if we're talking national park, nobody's going to get off at Darleydale, okay? It then goes to Roseley, so people go to Roseley, and where do they go from there? They want to go to Chatsworth, but how do they get to Chatsworth? How do they get to anywhere to walk? Then we move on to Bakewell. Maybe Bakewell's okay. Then we get to Hassop. I mean, what do people do when they get to Hassop? They need transport, they need infrastructure, they need buses to get them to where they want to go. People go to honeypots in the national park. That's why we've got so many cars. They go to Chatsworth, they go to Haddon Hall, they go to Castleton. All these places where they've got to have a car. They want to take the family, they want to take prams, they want to take food. If anybody takes a portable barbecue, I will personally kill them. But that's the way the traffic goes. And we move on from Hassop to Monsaldale. I mean, where do people go when a train drops them off at Monsaldale? For goodness sake, you know what? It would need taxis and buses and minibuses if you could get them down there. And then at Millersdale, I mean, Millersdale, people go to Millersdale because they want to walk along the Monsell Trail, but suddenly they get there and that's got railway on it. So it's not so idealistic as we try to make it out. There are a lot of mitigating factors that you have to take into consideration. I've lived in the national park all my life, and I've seen it happen all my life, and it's not just as easy as we try to make it out. Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. So it's been proposed and seconded. So can we have a vote, please?
Just briefly, can't quite speak as eloquently as Councillor Chapman, but one thing, you know, the health and tourism benefits of the Monsell Trail, the High Peak Trail. Derbyshire County Council decided at Cabinet last week to give a substantial capital investment to extend the White Peak loop at Roseley. To even think about having a consultation or an exercise to see what it would cost, and to put a rail line in, you know, in this economic climate. I know there's lots of things to talk about, but this is obviously taking the imagination because Councillor Shelley's come, but it's not an easy subject. But, you know, the County Council and the Peak Park and a major landowner in the area has said that he would not have the line going across his land. So I think that's pretty much it.
And I would add the tunnel can't be reopened. I don't think that's been looked at before. The Haddon Tunnel is almost inaccessible, I think. But any alternative route would have to go uphill and down Dale to get to Bakewell. And we need to comment on...
Could I sorry, yeah. After others have finished, could I wind up, please?
Well, I was going to say we need to consider Councillor Shelley's point, really, I think, before we forget that. Does anyone want to propose that we amend the wording of question 42 in the consultation document?
Not only that, Chair, but some of the points that Councillor O'Brien made.
Okay,
I mean, the chance to those being the tone being modified with the kind of consultation that was alluded to, that is with you, your Vice Chair, and Mike, then that would seem to be a good way forward. Just to come back, I mean, we're not talking about are we going to have the railway line, are we not? We're just talking about not ruling out the possibility 80 years down the line, because I think, you know, for those of us who can remember Beeching and the cuts, I mean, the wisdom of hindsight now is colossal on, you know, what we would rather not have happened as the bridges were taken away, the embankments were taken away, you know, the alignment was shifted. We're just saying, don't let's completely rule it out in the future.
Thank you. We need to obviously talk about the opportunity in question 42 of the consultation, as Councillor Shelley has suggested. Does anyone want to propose that we do that, in which case we need to amend the recommendation, of course, to take that into account. But it depends what members feel about Councillor Shelley's proposal. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, as this plan runs to 2045, and Councillor Dodds just mentioned the next 80 years, well, that covers up to 45, so I suggest it stays as it is up for this current, for the Peak Parks input into the master plan.
Does that find support from other members? Because you need to decide whether you're going to amend the response to question 42 or keep it as it is, as Councillor Chapman has just suggested. Councillor Linthwaite.
Yeah, I mean, it does say raised concerns, so I think that does cover it, really. I don't think it's that, or am I misreading that? You know, it doesn't boot it out completely, but it is just raising concerns. I mean, just from a cost alone point of view, it would just be completely astronomical. So, you know, it doesn't seem to me to be a realistic option, but it is just say raising concerns, and I think that seems fair enough.
Does that find member support? What Councillor Linthwaite has just said, Councillor Chapman as well.
Yes, well, option one is to continue to, that is the status quo.
Okay. Any further contributions? Councillor Wayne and Councillor Murphy wants to speak as well.
Yeah, I just want to say that thank you to Councillor O'Brien for that really excellent assessment of the report. And what we mustn't lose sight of is that anything the Peak Park do or don't do has an impact on the greater area of us all. That our housing, you know, I think it's 58% of the Peak Park is held within the Derbyshire Dales, and currently 42% of the landmass takes the predominance of that development. So I think they do need to get more positive about things. They do need to have more provision. And coming from a small rural village myself, people do want to stay within the villages. They do want to be housed within villages, whether it be family members that are downsizing and releasing other properties, or whether it be young family members that want to work in the community. So we want to encourage the Peak Park to wake up and smell the coffee. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, I think you wanted to speak for quite some time now.
Right. It was, after listening to Councillor O'Brien, I have every sympathy with him. I won't be voting on this item because I'm on the Peak Park, but the phrase that we're given when we're on the planning committee is they keep telling us they're not a housing authority. So that's quite a frustration. Yeah, they're quite set in their ways. So thank you, Peter, for what you've said.
Any further contributions? Oh, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for expressing those views. It's the views I've held for many, many years. Not just in the Peak Park, in the Derbyshire Dales as a whole, we've got the problem of losing a lot of residents who've been there many, many years, families being broke up and having to move out to neighbouring districts. But in Peak Park, I've really failed, in my opinion, to address this situation, as Peter's already said. I think they've got to really get their act together now and say, look, things have got to change. We've got to keep families together. We don't want families splitting up. We want to keep families together. So I want the Peak Park now really to come alive and acknowledge that it's 2024, not 1824. So I think we've got to change things enormously for the Peak Park, and not in a constructive way, not go in and knock everything about, but in a constructive way. We want more social housing there. We want more affordable housing. So I agree with everything what Peter O'Brien said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further contributions? Councillor Chapman.
I'd just like to remind everybody that the National Park is surrounded by 11 constituent councils, all with the same attitude that Derbyshire Dales has got. So if we multiply what Derbyshire Dales is asking for by 11, then we can say goodbye to the National Park.
That is certainly a viewpoint, yes. I think sometimes people in Derbyshire Dales forget that the National Park represents all those authorities. It's not just Derbyshire Dales and High Peak.
In very highly populated authorities as well.
Exactly, that's right, yeah.
If I could just wind up as proposer, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Brown.
Councillor Chapman, David Chapman is just as passionate about the National Park as I am, and I admire his passion. He is a champion of the National Park. He's a brilliant advocate for the National Park. So thank you, David. I think it's unfortunate if people characterise what I've said as a free for all in the National Park. That's not what I said, and it's not what I think anyone in this council is advocating. All I'm saying is our communities, they're living communities, but they're facing an uncertain future and they need nourishing. And one of the ways you nourish them is by enabling families to thrive and flourish in their community. But housing that meets their needs is the single most effective way of doing that. We're not talking about building new towns and new villages. We're talking about sensitive new development on appropriate sites with the consent of the community that meets the needs of those communities. And what I'm saying is we want the National Park Authority to acknowledge that and play their part, not just warm words and not just telling us how difficult it is, but acknowledging that they have a role to support those communities, to support the housing authority. Not simply say, oh, we're only the planning authority. That's not our purpose. It's a shared purpose that we need to work together. And as I said, I've spelt out a number of ways in which they can play that proactive role. On car parking and congestion, all I'd say is it is difficult, but let's look at examples from other national parks. Let's look at the Lake District, where they, as I said, they have now effectively said you cannot park in the Lake District. It is like that. The whole of the Lake District is a no parking zone, and it works. When you go through the Lake District, you cannot stop and park anywhere. And it works because you know when you go as a visitor into the Lake District that you cannot just stop and park in the way you can at Mamtor or Stanage or Dovedales. You can't just pull up and stop and get out and go for a walk. So people respect that. So what I'm saying is, those of you who don't visit the National Park, go up to Castleton, go up to the Hope Valley, come up to Padley Gorge at the weekend and just look at it and just look at the situation you have there. So we have to do something serious about it. And one of the solutions may be, in 40 years' time, we may be looking again at the old railway line and looking to see whether there's an innovative form of transport. It may be nothing like the railway proposal that we've had over the past few years. So I think we're quite right in saying we must not rule out the possibility of a new form of mass transit which doesn't involve a metal box. We mustn't rule out the possibility of that coming forward in the future. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'll just slight comment on that. There is an organisation or a lobby group in Buxton that's promoting a sort of electric tram arrangement to take people from Buxton to the north end of the Monsell Trail. That's Blackwell. That's probably an option that could be developed perhaps. And it could be either on the trail, partly on the trail, or stopping at the trail terminus. But that's something that could be looked at. There's obviously the quarry railways in that area that go to Buxton or through Buxton or past Buxton. And they could be dual purpose, I think, for that particular thing. So it's been proposed and seconded that the District Council respond to the Peak District National Park Local Plan Review Issues and Options Consultation as set out in Appendix 1 is agreed for submission to the National Park Authority and submitted by the deadline of the 29th of November. So all in favour? Thank you. Okay, anyone against? Any abstentions? 4 abstentions. Right. Thank you. Okay, that's carried then. So now we go on to item 11, I think that's right, which is the one that some members of the public came about to start with, I suspect. And that's permanent gypsy and traveller site identification. Permanent being the operative word there, in fact. So can I ask Rob Coggins to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the work of ARC to identify potential permanent traveller sites in the district. ARC worked hard, contacting many agencies and landowners and made many site visits and preliminary assessments of land that was potentially available. It was a very challenging brief for them to do, and I met with them weekly to go through their findings. I went through various stages of depression during that approach because it's a very challenging market to try and find land for travellers. The 3 sites in private ownership that are referred to in the reports have some merit, and owners have been approached. And that I think it's fair to say that there's still some hesitancy on their part. I recommend undertaking further assessments at a modest cost, and that's set out in the report, and that further discussions with those landowners takes place. Of course, if the owners do not wish to proceed, then we would not spend any of the funding that we're asking for on those sites. During the course of the work, it became apparent that the most likely way of finding sites would come through land at auction. Like me, ARC were on Rightmove most days looking for opportunities. And clearly there were caravan sites and other pieces of land, agricultural land, coming up that were available at auction. But that implies a very different approach to acquiring sites that councils typically don't follow. Councils typically like a low-risk model where you try and negotiate and look for opportunities. But going to auction would change the model that the council is considering. So, given that that's the most frequent and likely place to acquire land that would be suitable, the report recommends that the council, through a development agent, would undertake a bid auction. Now, to do that, we would need to set up safeguards so that the officers and members were happy with the approach that was taken, because it would be unfair for myself or the estates managers to pop up an auction and try and acquire land without proper oversight and limits imposed by members. So the recommendation is to develop a procedure that we would then bring back to this committee that you could agree and that we would then put into practice. One of the other recommendations that ARC talked about was compulsory purchase. Again, this is a model that you might see in relation to developing new roads or public facilities. It isn't typically used in housing terms, but it nonetheless is used by some councils, at least as a threat or an encouragement to an owner to consider a sale when we find an appropriate site. So again, we have been notified of other councils, rural councils, that use or threatened to use CPO in the past, and I think again that would be something we would bring back to members to consider going forward. There's been obviously a lot of interest in the Woodyard site, and I think it would be appropriate just to comment on that for a moment. The existing consent is more akin to a touring caravan site than a traveller site. The 8 pictures there that are in the permission reflect that form of accommodation, and it previously reported to council the document called Places We're Proud Of, which is something that the traveller community together with academics and the government have published, and that really sets a standard that I would hope that we would want to adhere to, where there are facilities on site and that travellers have a permanent place that they can call home. That's the sort of standard we want to apply, and when you apply that standard to the Woodyard, it just falls short in terms of the availability of the land, how it will be used, and the cost of making that land suitable for development. That's been independently and appropriately assessed by a quantity surveyor, and the details are very thorough. So I'd be hesitant in furnishing that to the owners, because we have paid for that, the council's paid for that, and giving it to somebody else would give them an advantage in that land. So I wouldn't think that was an appropriate use of public funding. I'd happily take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Yeah, Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Rob. Excellent report. Very clear recommendations. So just a couple of questions, really, just to help with a bit of clarity. Just in terms of the risk element, the increased risk of having a different approach, particularly around auction, I'm just interested in what those risks potentially are, because in my layman sort of kind of mindset is you buy a piece of land, whether you buy it at auction or whether you buy it on a market, you've bought an asset. So it's not like you've bought a complete dud. Even if you can't do anything with it, the intended purposes, you still have the land itself that you've paid for. So I'm just trying to understand what the increased risk would be, but I'm fully supportive of kind of officers having that kind of increased kind of toolkit to try and move this forward, because we've certainly not made any progress for a very long time over a number of administrations. So it'd be really great that we could kind of get this sorted once and for all, and hopefully this giving you this support would allow that, hopefully.
Thank you. Shall I come back on the risk question?
Oh, yeah.
The main risk with an auction is that as soon as the details are published, you've only got a certain amount of time to do your investigations of the land. There's an assumption that development's quite straightforward, and I think you've heard already this evening about how difficult it is in the national park. Land inherently carries risk, and I quote to my colleagues, a council not too far from here that built land on a burning coal seam because they didn't do their assessments appropriately, and they had to knock down the houses they built. So it is not without risk, and I wouldn't want to be the officer that said, oh, let's buy that bit of land and then build the houses and then knock them down again. So, you know, we need to be really clear that what we're getting into, because even experienced housing associations that develop hundreds of homes a year are reticent to buy land at auction. So it's not a light step, that's what I'm saying. And of course, if you acquired land and then actually decided after a month of investigations and the hammer drops and it's yours, you then decide actually it doesn't quite fit the purposes because you've discovered something else about the land later on, you've then got to try and sell it again. Or, I mean, you might be able to find a different use, but if you then sold it for a lower amount than you bought it for, again, that shouldn't fall on, you know, that's public money you've wasted potentially. So those are some of the risks that we need to be mindful of.
Thank you, Rob. I have Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Lees, and then Councillor Linthwaite.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at recommendation 4, the procedure for the potential acquisition of land at auction for the provision of a permanent and temporary traveller sites. What's the thinking behind sort of buying a site that would be for, you know, a temporary site? Surely we couldn't justify doing that if it's only for temporary.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's giving ourselves as many options as possible to help solve this issue, because it's obviously an issue the Council's grappled with for many years. To create a route into through an auction to acquire land just solely for permanent use, when we still have a need to provide temporary accommodation, I think wouldn't be the optimum model, I would suggest.
Now Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Quite agree with Councillor Whitehead on this one. You buy something at auction, it's very rare that you're going. The only thing you're going to probably lose if it doesn't work out is the costs you've incurred with solicitors, etc. The land's always got that value, come what may it be. So if it didn't work out, if you didn't get planning, you've got that piece of land. We've got the expertise of the people that can buy these land or plots or buildings at auction that would know the value of the resale of it. So I don't think it's as high a risk as what we're making it out to be. I think it's quite feasible, and I don't think we should be looking at solely land. I think we should be looking at other large properties with large car parks, and like there's loads of disused pubs around about the district in the rural areas, you know, ideal places. So I don't think we should dismiss auctions at all. Thank you.
Yes, Guy, this isn't a question, but it was just a bit of information really that might help Councillor Whitehead. Having spent 18 months trying to find some land to buy at auction and finally succeeded this year, there are two main risks. The first is that once the hammer drops, that's it. You cannot back out. So it's not like buying a house where you've got weeks to get your surveys done, get all your legal work in place, and you can back out at any point before signing the contract. That's not an option at auction. The second risk is that legal packs are supposed to be provided to the auctioneer 7 days prior to the sale. In my experience, that's never happened. In 18 months, I didn't find one where that happened. 2 to 3 days was really good. 1.5 hours was normal. So the risk there is that you may have your legal pack and you look through it and then you find actually there's a clause in there that says you can't have travellers, you can't use it for this, you can't use it for that, or someone else has got rights over the water, or, you know, whatever. So that's really where the risk falls.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions to start with, Rob. We've obviously got, with this Woodyard thing, a lot of councillors are getting emails every day about what the Woodyard people say, ARC is saying the other thing. You know, there's got to be some meeting in the middle. I'm not an expert. Could you not just sit around the table and talk about this? Because we're just bemused by it. That's the first thing. Would you sit around the table with them?
Well, members have previously decided to not pursue the pursue the Woodyard site, so that's something to bear in mind. Obviously, if any landowner wants to talk to the council about potential land, we'd be interested. But so the door's always open, but we've got to consider the practicalities of delivering a site. And as I said, we've had a QS undertake a thorough assessment of the costs involved, and those costs, are not small.
I think there's some difference of opinion between the pairs of you. It would be helpful if you could both make an effort to see what can happen. Thank you. And my second question is, I have although I think a nimble approach could be a good thing to do, we're dealing with public money, and I would want to know, and I thought this was coming to this report, I'd want to know a proper chain of command, who was going to make these decisions. I appreciate it's got to be quick, but you've got to have officers and members who are prepared to, put the head above the parapet and agree to this. I do understand that, but I'll make my comments for later. That's a question about when will we see these procedures.
Yeah, so the recommendation says we'll come back to committee with a proposed way of doing this. So that'll be on my to-do list for maybe next committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got comments later.
Okay. Yeah. Can I just add to that? So the first question that Councillor Hobbs asked, in terms of the, I suppose, propriety of meeting the Woodyard owners and so on. I mean, did the 1.3 million quote or estimate that the QS provided, was that following a detailed survey on site, or was it just remotely as a desk exercise?
It was based on the design that Pelham Architects produced, which was at the time with the support of the agent. When that design was produced, we were on site with the agent at the time. That was measured up and assessed, and that was the design that the QS then reviewed.
Yes, Councillor Archer.
Sorry to spring this on you, Robin, if you can't answer it, understand. But just for context, the Woodyard's been ruled out because of cost. What would be a ballpark figure that would have been acceptable? How far away are we? Because I don't really have in my head an idea of how much is an acceptable figure. I know you may not be able to answer that in this forum, and I should have raised this with you earlier, so I understand if you can't, but just interested. So.
I think in the answer to the earlier questions that I think were raised by the community, that sets out some of the costs involved there. So every site will be different. The economics of each site will be different. With affordable housing, or as a temporary site, or a permanent site, or as a house, there's the income side to consider, which is raised through rent, and there's the expenditure side, which is the capital bit to start with to build the thing in the first place. So every site will be different. If the land is free, so for example it was our own land, that massively reduces the initial cost of the development, because that's a gift essentially. If it was a Section 106 contribution on a private development, again the site would be very much reduced. But when you're acquiring site with an owner where they have an expectation on value, if there's no movement in that, then as an owner and a prospective purchaser, you need to come to view at some point and decide whether or not you want to proceed, and that's probably where we are at the moment.
Is that okay, Councillor Archer? Oh, yes, Councillor Slack.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. It's very interesting, isn't it, really, to look at different aspects of buying land. I think the main priority would be water. Water has got to be close by. And I think farmers, when they buy land, always look if there's water available for the cattle. So there's lots of different ideas. We do want to know before we attempt to buy land through option, that there's water available and things like that, and probably how far it is from the nearest transport routes and things like that's available. So we do need to have information, and I was a little bit concerned with Councillor Linthwaite when she said 2 or 3 days. Yes, I was very concerned about that. Is that the likelihood of it, or is it, does it vary different options?
I think we'll have to go up to Councillor Linthwaite onto the group that would help deliver this if she's got some recent experience.
Yeah, I mean, the 7-day rule, I haven't attended a single auction in 18 months where the legal pack was presented 7 days prior to the auction. 2 to 3 days, as I say, was good going, but normally 2 hours would be absolutely normal. And you see people who are interested waiting in Bagshaw's offices, and the packs come in and they go into a quiet room and read through them, and that's your lot.
Yeah, what is the usual when they have first advertised them, a few weeks, or when they're not the packs, they're the size?
How often do they have auctions? Every month?
Every month.
Every 6 weeks? Quite regularly,
we would have generally a good idea if there's water there, wouldn't we? Would we not?
You'd get basic information in the sales pack, which would tell you the size, it would tell you if there are any footpaths, and it would tell you if there was water on site, and it would tell you what it had previously been used for, but that's it.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Wayne, and then Councillor Lees.
Thank you. Rob, one of the things you said it just falls short. Now, does it just fall short, or it just falls short? Can you explain that, please? Because it's one of those things, like let him have it. Is it let him have the gun, or going back to those things? So how did you mean that, please?
I'm conscious that anything I say may be taken down and used against me. So
you're not obliged to say anything, though.
No. Well, it's difficult to put that into words without prejudicing any future discussion, I think, given the site we're aware of.
I'm obviously asking the wrong questions tonight, aren't I? But at the end of the day, you said that, well, it's been approved for 8 pitches, and you said it's more conducive to a touring caravan site. So, are you able to say what makes that, different from being okay for 8 caravans, because presumably those vans will require it?
If you look at the any of the previous design guides that have been produced by the Welsh Office, the Scottish Government, the Irish Government, and other devolved nations, and the UK Department of Environment, they very clearly set out amenity blocks, parking, play areas, as well as all the access to fire safety, spacing between vans. I've read these documents, and if investing public money into this is more than a standpipe and somewhere to pitch a caravan. People are working, they're doing trades, they've got vehicles. If we're going to do something that's more than a standpipe and a toilet block somewhere, that's the standard that the government funding is about, and that we should, ideally that's what we should be aiming for. So just simply lining up 8 vans along a stretch of land on the A6, that isn't a traveller site.
No, I appreciate that. I go to many caravan sites, not traveller sites, but caravan sites, and at the end of the day, I do realise they've got to be spaced, but there are toilet blocks. So thanks very much for explaining that. Thank you.
Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In my previous life as a developer cum builder, over my 30 odd years in the building industry, I've bought many a site, many a plot, developed it from buying at auction. Yes, these problems do arise, like Councillor Linthwaite says, but it's normally just the odd little hiccup that you've normally got an inkling, or you can walk away from it that day before. But the majority of the stuff, if you've got somebody experienced that's looking at these sites, looking at the ins and outs of it all, I think you'd find out most of the questions before you even see the the pack. Yes, they are quite a lengthy pack, and she's quite right in what she just said. You do have to queue up and have a look, and you don't get a lot of time to look at these packs, but most of the time, on a lot of these plots that's up for auction, you've got a different idea of what you're going to do with the plot anyway. So a lot of it isn't relevant, but most of it could be sorted by professionalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for insight, and to Councillor Linthwaite for our extended insight. Well, it's now 7:45, so I think we need to make progress. We now move over to debate, and is someone willing to propose the 4 recommendations? Or was it 5? 5 recommendations, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Dobbs, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose this. Clearly, the stakes are pretty high. The necessity of a provision of a permanent traveller site is key to a successful local plan revision. We don't have one in place at the moment. Even if the debate about Homesford was somehow resolved, that doesn't answer the problem. That's not enough in a sensible format. So I think we have been offered, with these suggestions, a way forward. I think we appear to have some consensus that this would be sensible, and I'm happy to support them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Franks, are you seconding the motion?
I'd like to second the motion. I think it's essential we move forward on this. ARC have still a couple of sites to work up and look at a bit more to see if they could be developed. However, we do need to move forward. We do need to have another route to purchasing, and I think auction is, we need to develop that, a process where we can do that.
Councillor Hobson and Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I can't support these recommendations. You know, we have these people, we've had not as many people here tonight as we've had in the past, but once again people come and talk about loss of faith in the council, emails not being answered, lack of information, lack of transparency. It's almost as though these people come and speak or they email in, and then the councillors have just got, like, you know, tin ears. Oh, we must move on, we must move forward. This is public money that we are spending. We have to know, somebody has to know what you're spending the money on. It's like something out of Kafka, this. If we could agree a nimble approach with proper checks and balances, I just can't agree to this. This is, you know, even whether it's 25,000 or 12,000 for these 3 sites, we have no idea where those sites are. I'm not just thinking of my area, I'm thinking of other people's areas. And you talk to the people on the ground, which I've always said, your parish councils, your town councils, your ward members. They probably know more about it than ARC do. And I'd actually disagree with Nick Whitehead, because I don't think this report's very full or very informative at all. Obviously, I've not seen the full report either. So, you know, I could have perhaps supported the nimble approach if we'd seen tonight, you know, some proper, you know, who were going to be the people that, you know, put the head above the parapet. But other than that, you know, I'm just thinking about the people that write to me and don't get any answers from this council.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, I do think I agree with it. It is important that people who write in get a response, a speedy response if possible. So I'd urge officers to make sure, and the leaders of the council to make sure that does happen in the future. Because I've also had complaints from people who haven't had answers to questions. So I think that needs to be improved. Now, Councillor Whitehead.
So I just wanted to come back to Councillor Hobson, really, because I just say how really disappointed I am to hear that from her, because she knows probably better than anyone else in this chamber what my community has gone through, because she's engaged with them, given her time up to listen to them. But all that approach, if we followed Sue's approach today and voted against this proposal, well then we're nowhere again. So we're still stuck making no decisions. This is a pragmatic way forward. It gives us options, clear options. So yeah, we don't know the sites. I don't know the sites, but we shouldn't know the sites. Confidential information. These are private landowners. It's not our business to know the sites as individual members. We have professionals to engage with that. We've engaged a professional company to do that engagement work for us. We need to give them the tools to be able to deliver what we all want. And I hope you would want us to enter this solution as well, so that Roseley wasn't kind of then dumped upon in the same way that Matlock Bath has been dumped on for the last 2, 3, 4 years. So I'm really, really disappointed, Sue, that you can't at least get behind the spirit in which this report is put forward in. So that's all I wanted.
Can I just come back, Chair, just briefly, because I know we need to get on. I could get behind it if there were those checks and balances. It's public money. This is my community at Roseley. I've supported your community as well. This has gone on since 2012 with them, and they do not know present constraints at the present time. These people, our residents, they're looking at every report, wanting that information, and you as a councillor can't give them that information.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
yes, it will go through. But I'm just saying, as a challenge, this is public money that we are spending, and to say, oh, let the officers do it. We're the elected members. We should direct the officers. We should make the decisions.
It's always going to be public money because we are a council. The money we have is public money. So the way my community's been kind of impacted because of decisions this council has made over years, that's all been done with public. All the public money that's gone into sort of trying to correct the kind of and support the travellers in that location, that's all public money as well. The never-ending temporary tolerated site, that's all public money as well. So the solution for us in Matlock Bath and for Roseley and for every other community is to have some permanent sites. Because then, once we've got permanent sites properly facilitated and supported the culture of the travelling community as they should, that takes the pressure off all of our communities. So to just sort of try and cut this proposal off his knees when it's trying to move the situation forward, I don't think that supports your community well at all.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I must admit that when I first saw this agenda item only a week ago, I had doubts about the 3 privately owned sites and voting for almost a pig in a poke in effect, because I didn't know where they were. I knew they were privately owned, and I realised when it was explained to me about the commercial sensitivity of revealing a privately owned site, and also on the recommendation that no further work is undertaken on the Woodyard, Roseley and Watery Lane, Ashbourne. I had doubts about that as well. But I think I've been reassured tonight that by officers and others that I think the recommendations are acceptable to me anyway now. Any further contribution, Councillor Linthwaite?
Obviously, the whole of the Woodyard issue occurred before I arrived here in this council, but I have been on the receiving end of the blizzard of emails like everybody else, and there are 2 points I'd like to make. One, I am deeply concerned by the accusations that seem to be flying around about officers and behaviour. It's very easy to throw mud. It's not easy to wash it off, particularly when officers are not in a position to defend themselves, and a lot of the information is confidential. So I'm deeply concerned by that, and I'd be deeply concerned by any efforts by members to stir up or continue that kind of route. The second point I'd like to make, and maybe I've misunderstood something here. If I go and look at a house with a view to buy it, and I decide not to buy it, that vendor has no right to come back to me and demand to know why I don't want to buy it, or demand that I do buy it. And it does seem to me that the Woodyard falls a little bit into this character, that the council is being put under pressure to buy something that they've looked into, and as far as Mr. Coggins' team and him personally is concerned, I have every faith that that team is working responsibly and correctly.
Thanks, Chair. I repeat what I said a few months ago. I do wish we recorded these 20 years ago, then we could just not come here and just replay them every time we've got a meeting. Sorry to be so cynical. But I was disheartened by the beginning with this, with the report summary, and it says, whilst ARC were unable to secure suitable sites, they have identified 3 potential sites that need further assessment. ARC have also reflected on the shortcomings of the traditional approach of councils. That says in big capital letters to me, we can't find anything, but it's your fault.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I too support the very much support the recommendations from the report. I'm the last one to condone any sort of lack of transparency on the council, as many of you will know. But let's bear in mind, we have set out as a council, not as as a council as a whole, we have set out very clearly the criteria which are going to be used for the selection of prospective permanent traveller sites. Even when those sites come forward, they still have to go through a transparent planning process. So even when these sites come forward as being feasible, they still have to go through that independent process where our planning committee engages in a full consultation process with the communities and with a range of other bodies. So when these sites come forward, this is not the council saying these are the sites we're going to take forward. It's saying these are feasible sites. We're spending up to 25,000 because we want to avoid the fiasco we had previously when a site was identified. We pressed ahead to try to develop as a traveller site without having undertaken any of these initial feasibility studies. And we know where that site was, and we know the difficulties we got into as a council proceeding on that basis. So we're doing what we failed to do previously as a council. We're doing some preliminary investigations to make sure we're not going to pursue something which is totally not feasible. What I would suggest, when the discussion we had just now about the difference between a touring site and a traveller site, go and have a look at the traveller site in Tinsley on the outskirts of Sheffield. If you go there, I suspect many people have not actually seen with their own eyes what a really well laid out traveller site looks like. It looks nothing like a caravan site, absolutely nothing like it. Rob is quite right. Go and have a look at the site at Tinsley, and then I think you will come back with a different perspective. And I think when you see those sort of sites, you will then appreciate the cost that the council is going to occur when it comes to developing a site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further? Councillor Slack.
Yeah, I'd just like to give my support to Rod Coggins and his team. I think they've worked very hard indeed to come up with this, and I go along with everything they say. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I support. You want to speak again? No. I also support Rob's efforts in this as well. It's obviously gone on for a long time, and of course we need to remember about as Councillor O'Brien's alluded to, the fiasco of the Nabhall Lane site and the Hasker Farm site, etc. in the past with the previous administration. We need to bear that in mind. But we need to move to a vote now, I think. But what did you want to speak?
Yeah, just briefly.
Oh.
To thank Peter for his contribution there, because he obviously hit the nail on the head in relation to people's concerns about recent history and whatever. And yeah, I'm sure that's colouring some people's views, and creating nervousness. But I'm relatively reassured we're in a different era.
Yes, I would second that. So we need to move to a vote then, if possible. So the recommendation proposed by Councillor Archer and seconded by Councillor Franks that members note the results of the ARC Phase 2 report in this document. Secondly, that in accordance with the recommendations of the Gypsy and Travel Working Group, no further work is undertaken, and as stressed at the present time, doesn't rule out it in the future, in regard to progressing the provision of a permanent traveller site on land at the Woodyard, Homesford, Station Road Car Park, Roseley and Waterway Lane, Ashbourne, particularly the last one, I suppose, which could have an opportunity in the future. And thirdly, that Council be recommended to approve a supplementary revenue budget of £25,000 to be funded from the General Reserve to take forward a further phase of work aiming at assessing the viability of the 3 privately owned sites set out in the report, but not mentioned by name, of course. Any further sites that may emerge in the short term and further development support. And fourthly, that a procedure for the potential acquisition of land at auction for the provision of a permanent and or temporary traveller site be developed and presented to a future meeting of this committee for approval. And fifthly, that subject to recommendation 4 above, the consultation process relating to the identification and provision of permanent and temporary sites is amended to take into account the reduced timetable in relation to land purchased at auction. Further details will be developed and presented to a future meeting of this committee for approval. So can I ask for all those in favour to vote now, please? Thank you. And those who are against? 3 members against. Abstentions? 2 abstentions. Well, that's obviously carried. So thank you very much for...
Just a quick point of order. I think you said I'd recommended it. It was actually Councillor Dobbs that put it forward.
Wasn't it? That's right. Sorry about that, yes. Yeah. Right, Councillor Dobbs proposed it. Councillor Frank seconded it. Thank you. Right. We've got another half an hour before we need to get extra time, and I think in view of the weather forecast we don't really want extra time. So we need to go back now to the items that we've missed in the change of order. So it's number 7 now, empty home strategy and next steps. I think Jeremy Mason's going to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. Empty homes. With a 19-page report, obviously I'm not going to go into full detail on that, but I'd just like to pick out 4 key points for your attention. The first of those is that we've made it a corporate objective to provide housing that meets the needs of Dales residents. Now, we have over 1,000 long-term empty properties across the district, over 1,500 empty at any one time, but over 1,000 that have been empty for 6 months or more, some many years in fact. So if we are going to meet the housing needs of Dales residents, we need to make the best use of the stock we've currently got. Therefore, bringing empty homes back into use should be something that we support, in my view. It's a very valuable contribution to providing housing supply that's fit for purpose. Looking at more specifics, in the report there's a series of case studies provided. I think a particularly prominent and useful one is to look at the one of the Victoria Court Hospital in Ashbourne, a derelict eyesore for property in a prominent location. When the Empty Homes officer first came into post, that property was in limbo, and it's only because of his action and intervention that things got moving. It was sold at auction, and now it's under refurbishment. The properties there are imminently going to be on the market for sale or let, I believe. There are a number of tools we can use to bring empty properties back into use. We already have the Empty Homes Premium, which is a supplement to the council tax rates that are charged on long-term empty homes. But that kind of tool, though effective in some cases, is no substitute for personal intervention, as in the case of Victoria Hospital. So I think there's a very strong case for saying we should continue the role of the Empty Homes officer, whose contract is currently due to expire next year. The only other thing I'd add is that not only does he support work in bringing empty homes back into use, but he supports other objectives we have. As many members will be aware, we have recently been awarded 3.8 million from government for our LAF3 programme, and a part of the acquisition process to deliver that is to buy empty properties. The Empty Homes Officer's role is to help assess these properties. In particular, he's recently been trained up as an accredited energy performance assessor. He's registered with ECMK, which is a government-approved accreditation provider. So he can help in the role of assessing the energy efficiency of properties that we might want to buy as part of this very important programme. And of course, in his work advising empty home owners, private ones, he will advise on energy efficiency measures as well as just how to bring it back into use. In doing so, he's supporting our green objectives as a council. Bringing empty homes back into use is a form of recycling. It's a lot less carbon intensive than building new homes. I think that's all I need to say at the moment, but happy to take any questions on any aspect of the report or the recommendations.
Any questions for Jeremy? Yes, Councillor Dobbs.
It's a very short one. It's really a sort of how can we help? You say in 2.3 the only comprehensive district-wide records that we have are council tax ones.
Yeah.
Anecdotal evidence that we pick up from casework, the mechanism of feeding that through is just to email the Empty Homes Officer.
Yeah, correct. There's a dedicated Empty Homes email address which goes to the Empty Homes Officer, and that's publicised on our website, as is the phone number of the Empty Homes Officer. So we welcome and encourage anecdotal referrals because the council tax records do not by any means capture all of the vacant properties that there are in the district. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for an excellent report. It's really, really clear, set out really well, and the case studies actually really bring it to life and really help. So I have no questions because you've answered everything that I wanted to know in the report, but I just wanted to commend you on a job well done.
Yes, hear to that. Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, I just want to say it's an absolutely fantastic report, and it's like it's really inspirational what's been done and what can be done. I think we can all agree on that, to bring those empty homes back and into use. It's a fabulous initiative. It's really good, thank you.
Councillor Wayne and then Councillor Linthwaite.
Yeah, thank you. I have actually phoned up about a property on my ward, and councillors, if you do see homes that are there, it's well worth phoning up, and because, as you said, it's absolutely spot on that it's better to repurpose these houses than build new ones. So houses that have been empty for 5 or 10 years, I know this is more as a statement, but I just feel that it's excellent work you're doing, and thanks very much for the report. Thank you.
Question, the premium, the additional premium, the 450,000, how much of that have we been able to collect?
Now, we have the figures in the report. I don't know if the figures are for the amount that's billed or amount collected, I must admit. If I can find the relevant paragraph, I might be able to...
I was only curious, don't worry, you can answer the question later. I was really curious because I know that some of the owners of the empty properties can be quite difficult to get hold of. I just wondered if it was equally difficult to get hold of their money.
Yeah. I recall Director of Finance telling me that collection rates for council tax are well over 90%, I think. But I think one important aspect is a lot of these empty properties are exempt from council tax for various reasons, such as if the property is in probate. We have over 300 properties in probate, and again the Empty Homes Officer is trying to help people who need a bit of a handhold to go through the probate process. Some are just left in limbo. You do get other cases where there are lots of exemptions. There's no public receipt where perhaps there should be, or there would be if the property was reoccupied. So there's a cost to the public purse in leaving these properties empty as well.
If nobody else has got any questions, I'm happy to move it.
Oh, right, okay.
Recommendations, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry, you want to ask a question? Yeah.
I was just wanting to follow up on the probate. Probate has become a real issue since the last government changed the way of, if you like, going through probate, which is, instead of being done locally, and where you could approach somebody, discuss it and sort out any issues. It's now all computerised, and the sad thing is if you make one mistake, you put back to the bottom of the computer and it's nationwide. And so probate, which could take a number of weeks or maybe a few months if you got it wrong the first time round, it can now take 5 years. You know, it's getting ridiculous. Have you found that all the issues now with probate have really added to this, and those are actually properties which, if you like, the beneficiaries are just waiting to sell in the future? I mean, are you wasting time on finding a lot of time wasting on probate issues?
We have. I mean, it's the empty homes officer who works on these things personally rather than myself, but he does tell me that there's a lot of, as I say, we've got over 300 properties in probate over 6 months, some for many, many years, where they're going to remain there forever unless someone gets involved. But there are problems, as you say, with the National Probate Register Service, or whatever you call it, the process you go through, very long time delays, and people lose heart sometimes.
Thank you. I'm told that the snow is getting worse, even around this building, so I don't know what you want to do. We need to finish this item, obviously, but whether you want to complete the agenda is another matter. So, well, I think it's being proposed. It's being proposed by you're seconding it.
I'd like to second, Chair. It's fantastic work they've done with the Old Cottage Hospital, being one of the councillors which went round with the empty homes officer in the first place. This building has stood empty for 20 years. We'd had fires, antisocial behaviour, and to what it is now, it's fantastic the work that's done, so fully supported.
Right, thank you. Right, it's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Nobody against, is there? No? Right, thank you. So, do we want to continue with the last item on the planning validation, or do we want to... Yeah, if we can do it very quickly. Yeah, okay, Sean.
Yes, I mean, basically, just to make members aware of the last point, it's just for members to agree for the authority to put this documentation out for consultation for a period of 6 weeks. Effectively, we don't currently have a local validation checklist. The MPPF requires local authorities, or requires that local authorities should publish a list of their information requirements for applications for planning permission. And the corporate plan that was adopted on the 29th of February this year made a commitment to produce a new validation checklist with clear requirements in a number of areas, but specifically drainage. So that in order to facilitate this, we do need a validation checklist. The previous validation checklist the authority had was originally adopted in 2002. It was revised on the 15th of April 2011. We haven't actually used it as an authority for a number of years now, but we do need one. There are a number of authorities out there that do have them. We're probably in the not the only ones, but in the minority. So what I'm asking members to do with their agreement is that we put out the validation checklist as it is in draft format now to agents, to members, internal consultees, external consultees, a number of agents, and we'll publicise it on our website for a period of 6 weeks. Following the close of that consultation, we'll then produce an updated version of the checklist together with the points that were received and why we're carrying those points forward or why not. How the actual validation checklist has been revised, that will be in track changes or colourful way forward, but that will then be presented back to another C&E committee at that point for members just to agree and ratify that final version. It will then be adopted. That then means that when an applicant, agent or another submit applications, if they don't submit that information, it will not be made valid, and if after a certain period of time that information is not forthcoming, the application will be sent back. So we'll get a better quality, ideally get a better quality or certain information up front that we need for officers and members, planning committee, to consider applications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. I don't know how many questions there are, but I just want to ask a brief one. There are a lot of, if you look through all the local information requirements, all sorts of things to do with environmental issues. But the one that isn't there is that what I think is a need for landscape and visual impact assessment on relevant applications, especially the larger ones, of course. Because everything else is included, like tree surveys, agricultural assessment, etc., etc. So I think that one should be included because of the impact of development on the wider landscape. So I would like that to be included if possible, please.
Yes, certainly. I can draft a form of wording to go in there to slot into the environment section.
Thank you.
And now, Councillor Dobbs is very kindly on. We've had a little bit of discussion before the committee on a few things as well. So,
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, it's on page 92. You've got about the HRA requirements. Before it goes out to consultation, because you've put in there about the Oxford Meadows Special Area of Conservation, which we don't have. So if you can make that correct before it goes out for consultation, that'd be great.
Certainly. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm all in favour of this because it's going to hopefully enable a slicker process. That's really good. I've got a question, and unsurprising, it's about drainage. But we do have cumulative, on page 66 you go in about the cumulative impact of air quality, but there's nothing in here on the drainage system that I've seen about the cumulative effect of drainage and issues coming down, valleys. And this has been a bone of contention for many, many years, that we don't really assess this. It may not be the right format in here, but it is something that I feel strongly about. Where would that feature if it doesn't feature in here? Thank you.
My suggestion on that point, if you wouldn't mind dropping me an email to that effect, what we'll be consulting the county council on this basis. No, but I will be certainly having Teams meetings with them to make sure it's there, because it's in their best interest to make sure it's in this document, which effectively will make their assessment of proposals, small scale, medium, that require that information moving forward a little bit better, a little bit slicker.
Thanks very much. I'll send you an email. Thanks.
No more questions, then can I have someone to propose or move the recommendations, please? Councillor Linthwaite and Councillor Archer. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to propose it. It just seems a bit of a no-brainer, really, so thank you.
Councillor Archer, either of you want to speak on it? I'll move to vote in that case then. All in favour? Thank you very much. I think that's unanimous. Thanks very much for your attendance and safe journey home, really, especially to Sean, I think. Oh, Steve as well. Right.